What's up, Coordination? Today on the pod, we have Balaji, the one and only Balaji, who's just written a book about the network state. The network state is a highly aligned online community with the capacity for collective action that crowdfunds territory around the world and eventually gains diplomatic recognition from pre-existing states. So we talk about Ethereum, DAOs, how to create more coordination across network states, what would have to be true to build a network collective that perhaps eventually becomes a network state that is creating more coordination for network states and nation states across the world. What will be enabled by this new technology as opposed to social media just destructing things? How do we construct things with collective action in a network state world? So Balaji is this extremely prolific philosopher, thinker, successful startup founder, started earn.com, which exited to Coinbase. And I am just so thrilled to have him on the pod talking about network states and how can we build and fund digital public goods and public infrastructure in a network state world. This is one of my favorite episodes that we've ever done, and I hope that you enjoy. Without further ado, I give you collective action in the network state.
Immutable X is the layer 2 platform for crypto gaming. Immutable offers massive scalability with up to 9,000 transactions per second and instant transaction confirmation. No more gas fees, no more waiting around for your transaction to clear. Immutable's zero knowledge rollup finally unlocks the world of crypto gaming. Immutable X is the only gas-free NFT minting platform with over 26 million NFTs minted, all with zero gas fees. With the power of Immutable, gaming developers don't also need to become smart contract developers. They just need to plug in to Immutable's API and instantly start unlocking the full potential of crypto assets inside of games. This is why world-class companies and projects have decided to deploy on Immutable X, like GameStop, Ember Sword, Planet Quest, Illuvium, TikTok, and many more behind the scenes. So start building your game on Immutable X today at immutable.com. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses who need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage their treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the extremely secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasuries to expressive, flexible, multi-chain features such as global user management, global contracts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization. COINSHIFT layers on powerful treasury management tools on top of the proven security of Gnosis Safe, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. In DeFi, you have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
Balaji, how you doing, man?
Good to be here.
Yeah, so glad to have you. Thanks for agreeing to do this GreenPilled podcast episode on the network state. So tell us about the network state. What is it? Why does it matter?
So the network state is a new book that is in V1, meaning I am updating it. It's at thenetworkstate.com. And the fundamental concept behind it is that we've started new companies, that's Google, and we've started new communities, that's Facebook, and started new currencies with Bitcoin and Ethereum. Is it possible to start new cities or even new countries? And if it is, that would be a really big deal. And that is sort of in a sense, the cutting edge of social technology in terms of using technology to align people for common good, collective good, et cetera, online. I think what I've tried to do in the book is talk about a new emergence mode for a state. And one way of thinking about it is 2020 was arguably the year where a big chunk of the world, if not the elite of the world, went digital first. And so after 2020, things happened digital first and physical second. That's not to say that physical isn't important, but physical is now a premium product. For example, meetings occur digitally first, and only, if you really need them, do you physically go and fly in person. Conversations happen in WhatsApp groups and Signal chats, and only very, very high value ones or infrequent ones happen in person. And, currency, for example, that kind of flipped a while ago. Communication flipped a while ago, and in the sense that probably most communication was digital or electronic and, not printed out on a piece of paper quite a while ago, maybe even 10 years ago. but each of those are flippenings. And if you had a graph of, offline versus online, communication goes and then transaction goes and so on. And so the direction of all of that is digital first. And so, how would that exactly work? Lots of people have kind of proposed sort of vague things or things that I think are close, but not exactly right. And I talk about why they're close. For example, I don't think of Facebook as a network state or Bitcoin or WeWork. They have aspects that are similar. Like, Facebook has this huge international community, but it doesn't have any collective consciousness. That is to say, those 30-something billion people do not think of themselves as Facebook users, do not think of Zuck as their leader. He's just sort of like almost the bar owner or something like that. They don't report to him in a sense in the same way they do to a president or to the Chinese people have a very different relationship to Xi Jinping than Facebook users do to Zuckerberg. Facebook employees fold into Zuckerberg. That's different. They've signed a different social contract upon entering. And a big part of it is about expectations. It's possible that, Zuck, if he wanted to, could have not a click through, but a very serious social smart contract that he deployed to Facebook members that they sort of opted into governance. And what exactly would that mean? So I've got the one sentence definition, which is a network state is a highly aligned online community with a capacity for collective action that crowdfunds territory around the world and eventually gains diplomatic recognition from pre-existing states. So highly aligned online community, meaning it's not just a bunch of Game of Thrones fans who have nothing in common but their interest. It is people who really have a bunch of deep moral beliefs in common, at least one commandment in common, but like a serious thing. A capacity for collective action. So again, it's not just an online group. It's not just a bunch of disorganized tweeters. It is folks who can work together. And just to understand this point, which is why it's so important, if you have just 100 random people and you tell them to go and burn something down, burn down a building. I mentioned this point in the book, but 100 people, you say, go burn down that house. They can handle it because, one guy grabs a brick and some guy grabs a torch and they go to it. If you tell those 100 people, go build a building, that's much harder, right? Because first of all, they might not be able to do it. You're going to need, cement, and you're going to need a plan, and not everybody can go after it at once. And you'll need a foreman and some blueprints and skilled electricians. Basically, paralyzing building is much harder than paralyzing destruction. And so what happens today is that the collective action problems online, I've written about this, are largely cancellation and destruction and social mobbing and so on, because that's what the interfaces of these like social media programs allow, but it's also something that's fundamentally easier to do. It's easier to destroy than to build for the reasons I just outlined, like it's good that building is profitable, or else people wouldn't do it, because it's rewarding in all senses of the term. It's like you feel like you've accomplished something, first and foremost, and you gain the money to be able to do some more of it, and so on and so forth. If that wasn't the case, it'd be, people would just destroy everything and you'd have a negative sum world. So the capacity for collective action is a very non-trivial thing. Cryptocurrency is a part of it, but not the only part. I think leadership is a part, tasking is a part, and the alignment is very much a part, that people have to feel like they're there for the same cause. You can have all the tools, all the software, but if the mental software isn't there in people's heads, the shared values that underpin the valuations, if that isn't there, then you're not there. Okay, so it's a highly aligned online community with the capacity for collective action. That right there is what I'd call a network union, a digital union, a group of people that gets together and that does something for their members collectively, not necessarily solely negotiating with some malign employer, though that is a part of it. They could also, go and crowd purchase something. For example, they buy things in bulk. A network union could go and crowd fund something, like invest in a member's company. They could RT something and help that member's work of art gain exposure, and so on and so forth. The network union is there for the benefit of the community, and each person pays dues and or puts in their time. And you might have a cryptocurrency there, which sort of bookmarks, some person couldn't make it for this session, so they pay in and they're substituting capital in the form of labor. Obviously, Gitcoin and everything you're doing is very much in line with all of this type of stuff. Task boards for communities that have alignment, I think is really important. And so far, those communities have been like companies where the alignment is provided by the boundary and membrane of the company and the hiring policy and so on. But you could have a boundary and membrane of a community and a moderator policy, which is just like a subreddit. Join this community if you share these values, and then eventually it becomes a dues-paying thing, right? Okay. So highly aligned on a community with a capacity for collective action that crowdfunds territory around the world. So that third clause, that once you have the alignment, okay, that is upstream of being able to do things together online. And one of the biggest things you could do together is online. You gather the funds to buy land offline and live together. And crucially, and this is a very important point, not all in one place. Okay, so I've got this GIF, and that is actually the failure mode of city-states and startup cities and lots of other things, is they didn't decentralize the physical location. Okay, so take a look at this.
So this is a GIF that you just sent across that shows a network state growing from Tokyo to Mumbai to Delhi, and the annual income, population, and the amount of territory that it owns grows over time.
That's right. And the thing about this is, technically, I define it as a network state only when it gains diplomatic recognition from an existing sovereign.
So legitimacy from
exactly.
The nation state.
So I have a technical 4-stage kind of thing, which is I may lose the battle where people will say I'm founding a network state casually, but really I think it should be startup society, network union, network archipelago, network state. Okay, so startup society is just, I'm one person. It's like a startup company. The implication is that it's early, but has aspirations of being great, okay, or big. Network union is a digital union. That's a group online with a capacity for collective action. A network archipelago or physical archipelago, that is something that looks like this. It's got crowdfunded territory around the world, and those little pieces are all knit together into something that feels like the same territory, using like the capacity for single sign-on and augmented reality and so on that we now have. For example, like just the simplest version is you walk into any Google office around the world, and it's a little slice of Google. It's got Google branding, your Google badge works, you plug in, your laptop's on the Google Internet. All of these little fractal pieces around the world are homogenized and connected under the same ideology, right? And if you go a little bit further, into what's coming, I think just like the iPhone was sort of predictable if you were following mobile in the 2000s, not ultra predictable, it's sort of predictable. Augmented reality glasses that look like glasses, but that you can tap, like Snapchat Spectacles. I talked about this. It's one of the most predictable outcomes of the book or of technology. Those glasses are something that will allow, since people will wear them all the time and they'll wear them in a heads-up way, it actually adds, in a sense, even more online time because you don't even need to pick up your phone anymore. You can just tap your glasses and sort of just basically you have your hands free and you're online. And guess what? You can see augmented reality ghosts or projections from other people in your network state or startup society in your zone and talk to them as if they were there. And if you think about it, most of your interface with another human being, I mean, sometimes, of course, you want to give them a hug or, high five or something like that. But a big chunk of it is basically hands off. It's audio visual. And so, as I said, digital first and physical is a premium product, right? Like, for a lot of daily purposes, digital would be sufficient. And all these people, you could imagine actually some sort of 2030 Zoom that used various kinds of signals so that you had a bunch of people in 4 different locations sitting around a table, but the other 3 were in different locations. Do you know what I'm saying? And
it's like telepresence.
Yeah, telepresence of an augmented reality kind, right? Where you didn't even need to, right? So point is, there's other things like, ENS unlocking of doors, right? Or have you seen ARKit like sigils hovering in midair where you have to hold an NFT, you see a sigil there that indicates that this startup society has that territory. So you start thinking about essentially the augmented reality / transfer, / ENS-based transformation of the world such that your digital key unlocks a different view on the world than other people have. If you have the crypto passport for the Startup Society, this entire building suddenly has markings on it that indicates that you can go in. And otherwise, to anybody walking by, their AR glasses show it to be a nondescript building. Okay, so the return of secret societies, but at scale, it's really secret states. Okay, so this is kind of very, it's very Satoshi, it's very cryptocurrency. It, one of the things about that graph that I just showed is that's a lot of nodes there. But guess what? Not all of them have to be world visible. They could have different levels of visibility. Some of them could be encrypted. Some of them, in the sense that you can only see them if you have, an NFT. If you're part of the community for more than a year and have more than X amount of commitment, then you can see the Jerusalem or the Rome of that startup society, right? You can see the capital city, basically, or capital cities, perhaps, right? And so that's the crowdfund territory around the world. And the last bit is actually really important. Eventually gains diplomatic recognition from pre-existing states. So why do I include something like that? See, this is why I would never call myself, a libertarian. There's certain libertarian ideals that I understand and I think have been useful. In the same way, there's certain liberal ideas, conservative ideas, even anarchist ideas that I think have moved things forward or at least contributed something. But the thing is that I'll just poke at the naive libertarian who nobody may consider themselves such. Okay, really thinks they can go and just put a flag on some weird edge territory and then call themselves the president of something, right? And of course, the issue with this is them and what army. But as I talk about, actually, it's not just them and what army. It's really them and what nation, them and what country, right? What group considers themselves the natural inhabitants of this land? What nation is there, right? Just like a cryptocurrency, if you just considered yourself to have $1 zillion or whatever, no one would care. But if there's a community around you that gives it value, right, that's a scaled LARP. And actually all social constructs are, in a sense, scaled LARPs, meaning, live action role-playing games, right? So the last bit on diplomatic recognition is really important because what does that mean? It means it could be a city like Miami. It could be a internal jurisdiction like province or what have you, like Texas. Funny to call Texas a province, but because I use the term state otherwise, right? It could be an internal administrative division, or it could actually be a sovereign country like El Salvador's recognition of Bitcoin as national currency, or Kiribati or something like that. But I call this the bootstrap recognizer. The first legacy state or government that recognizes a network state and integrates with it, we've already got some precedent for that. You have things like Tuvalu doing, and Colombia doing deals with the .tv and .co domains, right? You have Wyoming and I'm not sure if there's the Netherlands or Denmark, Wyoming, and there was someplace in Europe recently that recognized DAOs and Ethereum and started integrating in a sense with the Ethereum network, right? You have the Miami and New York City mayors and El Salvador, Miami and NYC are taking salaries in Bitcoin, if I recall correctly, and El Salvador has Bitcoin as their sovereign currency. Go ahead.
So we're seeing the diplomatic relations between nation states and network states because these network states have bootstrapped enough legitimacy through their network effects to actually be diplomatically worthy, as opposed to just some guy who just declares his backyard a new area.
Exactly right. And one of the things in there, if you go to the longer definition, the last part of the longer definition says an on-chain census that proves a large enough population, income, and real estate footprint to attain a measure of diplomatic recognition. Okay.
Right.
So why is that part? Why do I front page that? Well, most people don't know this, but the US Census is actually in the Constitution of the United States. Did you know that?
Only because I've been doing my research on you, but I didn't know that before this.
Okay, fine. So that's kind of interesting, right? Because, the census in this case, what we call a census in here, today we might call it a dashboard.
Right.
That dashboard that I just showed you, that GIF showing the counters at the top, people will not trust those numbers at the beginning. They will want to click into them. They will want to look at proof of human, which I know that we both talked about. And they'll want to look at proof that the tasks and the income is actually happening. They'll want to click into proof of, real estate. And each of those will be diligence processes where people will be diligencing these crypto oracles.
Right.
And this is, I think, the right level, where it's okay for some of those things to fail at times, right?
Yeah.
But people are really starting to try to put weight on this stuff. It's kind of like if you use something in anger, right? Fire a shot in anger, right? It means to do something for real. You're not just doing toy exercise anymore. You're actually trying to use that new programming language you learned to solve a real problem right now. You're not doing it for the sake of learning. The training wheels are off, right? So obviously people are using crypto oracles for real things today in terms of trading, but this is kind of cool. We're using it to prove that this thing is real in a publicly diligenceable way, right? And yet a privacy preserving way. So it could be something where those 1,729 members all sign something where their .eth addresses to prove that they are who they are online.
Yeah, no, I just think that, it's also a way of bootstrapping legitimacy just from the start. I remember when Gitcoin first launched, we launched this results page that showed the traction going through the network. This is back in 2017 when every other thing in the blockchain ecosystem was just like a hope and a prayer and a white paper.
Yeah, exactly.
And it actually helped us like, hey, look, here's the live network stats of this. And it helped us bootstrap legitimacy, which is reflexive. It helps the network grow as well.
And remember, I think I was your first seed investor, very, very early on, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Yeah, which I appreciate. Balaji was the first, I think, check into the round after consensus, and your conviction really meant a lot to us, Balaji.
Well, I still believe in you guys, and I believe in what you're doing. And I one thing is I've always been a believer in the use of Web3 to build genuine ties between people, not just speculation and stuff like that. I mean, I think of speculation it's like, okay, that it's out there, but it has to be sort of, connected. The liquidity and all the financial engineering should be connected to something of, purpose,
to impact.
Right? Yeah. And sometimes it can be, for example, like commodities futures, initially agricultural futures, you have a farmer and they've got a crop and they've got an uncertain future price, for that crop. They don't know if their potatoes are going to be worth $10 or $1, but at $3 they can pay their rent and so on. So they sell the futures at $3, and then some guy with deep pockets, does the other side of that transaction, and they book the upside in the event that it goes to 10. They make $7 per, but they also take the downside loss. They're basically risk on. They're buying the risk. There are guys selling the risk. That's a totally reasonable thing for finance. That's a good thing. And there's lots of other things in finance, interest rates and NPV and being able to transform cash flows. All that stuff is good, but it's just something where it's like you don't want to build this house of cards on top of nothing.
Too much. So the foundation there is the physical product. So we want to be actually creating commodities futures on physical yams, not digital yams, like we saw in DeFi Summer.
So it's funny you say it. I actually say, in this case, the foundation is the moral fiber that binds the community. Okay, because the humans ultimately are what are sort of upstream of the whole thing. Any physical stuff will come out of their effort. And one concept I have is like an uptime tracker. Like that. It's like it's ping. It's like supposed to be at 99%.
6 nines. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So one concept I have is a moral uptime tracker. Okay, so like a tracking pole will judge sentiment over time, and then sentiment can fall off a cliff. Okay, and I've got I'm not sure. Can Screencaster or can Zen, can you project some images? I'm not sure if you can.
I don't think you can, unfortunately. But if you link the image here, we can put it in the show notes. Maybe we can just speak to it in the meantime.
All right, I'll speak to it. So basically, there's a graph which shows. So everybody's familiar with like the graph of like a stable coin losing its peg now. Unfortunately, it goes like this. Okay.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, so that happens over the course of like a few hours, right? Basically, a day. Now, there's another graph that actually kind of looks like that. It's the Gallup poll: church membership among U.S. adults now below 50%. Okay, and it's something where it's like stable at like 75% for a long time. In the last few years, it's just catastrophically fallen off a cliff to like sub 47% and keeps declining. Okay, the time scale is not a few hours. It's not one day. It's like 70 years, right? So it is thousands of X greater. But in a sense, it's similar because it's something losing its peg. That thing that people thought was a constant is becoming a variable. Okay. Right. And so, it was okay if it fluctuated like 75, 76, 72. Lots of things could be taken for granted once it was there. But when you undercut the foundations, Now you have people who just fundamentally disagree on core principles. You can't take that for granted anymore, right? And it's also something where trust in government looks not exactly the same, but similar. It's a long slide, and now it's in like the 20s in terms of people trusting government for generations. Okay.
Yeah.
And the thing about this is, you start thinking, okay, what if your community has a moral uptime tracker? You have certain moral principles. I'm not saying, to be clear, they don't have to be like the 10 Commandments or what have you. But one of the points I make is you probably want a one commandment, something that your community, right? It could be for Gitcoin that I don't know, collective self-sacrifice is good, or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Build and fund public goods is, I think, Gitcoin's one commandment.
Great. Okay. And then you have derivations from that. Open source is good, and being civil to people online is good, and so on and so forth, right? You have various derivations from that follow from that first thing. And you can argue.
This podcast is probably one of those derivations. Discovering like what regen Web3 could look like. Yeah.
There you go. Right. So the thing is that basically the problem is that many people have those moral premises implicit. At companies, it's interesting. The many companies have, they talk about company culture, and company culture becomes explicit when you're beyond a certain scale where it needs to be conveyed. Here's how we do things. We do it X way, Y way. And the most trivial is, we're using Google Docs rather than Word, and we're using Twitter rather than Instagram, and so on and so forth. Those are just sort of like tool choices.
Like symptoms rather than the cause.
Yeah, but basically those are useful because they're explicitly articulable, and some of them are more substantive. You can think of culture as a set of sliders. Like I'm a full in-person company or a full remote company, right? Yeah. I pay market compensation or highly equity-based, and so on. So like all of those are sliders that you can set, and different combinations will work. It's not that there's any one combination that works. And the thing is that culture is a set of sliders. Culture is this thing that is less important as like a one-person show or a small group because you kind of take it for granted. But as the company grows, the culture becomes more and more important. And for a startup society, though, it flips around. The culture is everything. The culture is actually, as with a startup company, the innovation is a technology because you're selling an individual product to people. For a startup community, the innovation is the morality, because you don't necessarily need to have, because it's hard to, by the way, have flying cars and other kinds of things. Forget all that. And I shouldn't say forget all of it, but basically you could have hundreds of startup society innovations that are not based on a technological innovation, but based on a social innovation. And you say, the way society is doing is bad. Here's what should be good. And you have history plus graphs to back up what you're saying. Okay.
Right.
Anyway, but go ahead.
And that becomes like the indexer for your startup society, for your like network collective. So for Gitcoin, it's build and fund public goods. You could do it around keto. You could do it around being a mother. You could do it around any of these interests. So we're indexing online based off of the interests that we have, and offline in nation states is based off our geography, which is more or less inherited.
That's right. But the thing is that one thing that's exciting to me about online tasking and Gitcoin, and what I call, I had this thing on crypto credentials and NTFs, and the concept of soul bounds or what have you. All of those, you put those together, Pooja's paper, and you put those together, and you have something where there's sort of portability between communities, because you don't just have on-chain tasks, you have on-chain credentials. And those on-chain credentials could be an endorsement from somebody, Naval endorsed this person, Kevin endorsed this person. It could be, oh, this person came in every single day for a year to this community forum, and they just organized stuff, they cleaned the whiteboards, whatever. They just showed diligence and public spirit and so on. And that's a kind of person that would be an asset to many different kinds of communities,
Right.
Or you have somebody who, it's even as trivial as, okay, they worked out every single day in the CrossFit community. That's somebody who probably will also be able to be disciplined enough for keto kosher,
It's almost like your reputation becomes your collateral in this one commandment moral fiber being the basis of the entire community. So as you accrue reputation over time, that makes you trustworthy, which creates a positive sum economy on top of that. Is that I know you're excited about identity. Is that sort of why, or how would you state why you're so excited about identity and this credentialing?
Why am I excited about identity? Because identity is it's like the hub where everything else is,
Yeah.
like it's awaki.eth and, / everything else. Or not really / you know what I mean? Like you first do effectively an ENS lookup, and then you're pulling all these other fields. And so everything is bound to that. So your entire crypto resume, all your crypto credentials, you log in with that. That's really your digital passport. And then the algorithm parses all of your on-chain contributions and votes and stuff like that, and determines whether you are admitted to the community or not. And if not, why? And it tells you have to do X, Y, and Z. And many of those things are not fundamentally commercial. They are non-commercial, but it wouldn't be possible to defend them algorithmically without all of the commerce and value around NFTs and around, fungible tokens for that matter.
Right. So this is really about how we coordinate with each other. The accrual of reputation informs the marketplace of ideas and how we transact with each other.
The Opera crypto browser is the world's first web browser built for the crypto community. With Web3 support and a non-custodial wallet, Opera lets you access DeFi apps quickly and easily. The Opera wallet has buy, sell, and swap features, and of course lets you view your beautiful NFTs, but the browser still lets you use any crypto wallet extension you prefer, giving you the choice and flexibility for the Web3 world. Opera lets you view and manage all of your assets across all the blockchains all at once, and offers seamless multi-chain support between Ethereum, Bitcoin, Polygon, Binance Chain, and other EVMs and Layer 2s. But Opera goes even deeper than that. Opera has a built-in homepage for crypto natives with the Opera Crypto Corner, with price charts, news feeds, NFT updates to make sure you are always on top of your game. And it even has Discord and Telegram integrated natively into the browser. That's crazy. Opera is truly building the battle station for the crypto world. Check out Opera both on mobile with Android and iOS apps, and on desktop too. ReFi summer has arrived, and CELO is here for it. CELO is the layer 1 blockchain for the regenerative finance movement. It's fast, planet positive, and built for the real world. CELO has committed towards producing a sustainable future from the very beginning, and is the world's first carbon negative, EVM compatible layer 1 blockchain. CELO has become much more than a technology, a currency, a community, or even just a layer 1. CELO is a movement to create conditions of prosperity for everyone. You can soon engage with all of this via green asset Uniswap pools on CELO, benefiting reforestation and other regenerative products through the Toucan protocol, Moss, and more. ReFi is also about the health of communities, and Resource Network is creating Bankless infrastructure for circular trade and mutual credit networks to benefit small businesses and local economies, all on CELO. Follow along on Twitter to learn more about how CELO is accelerating ReFi Summer for a positive impact on people, communities, and the planet. If you're attending ECC, visit the CELO Saloon to learn about what's happening on the front lines of ReFi from industry experts.
So I guess, I'd love to focus the rest of the episode on the Network State is such an amazing book, and I will put a link to it in the show notes. I encourage the readers to check it out. But you've done a couple of different podcasts over the last few days. I would encourage the listeners to check those out. But I think that the highest use of this podcast time, Balaji, would to be talking about how we can build network states that increase the capacity for collective action. How do we build a coordination, which is like a network state or a network collective before it gains physical territory or diplomatic recognition, that the main export is more coordination. So like forkable open source software. And basically what we want to do is increase the capacity for coordination for all other network states and nation states. This is Gitcoin's One Commandment, which is building funding public goods. And I guess like my first prompt for you within the category of that is, how do we increase our capacity for collective action within these nation states? How do we build public infrastructure within these nation states? How do we fund it? How do we build it? And how do we coordinate better using network states than we have in the past?
So within existing nation states, are you saying, or yeah?
Well, I mean, I guess like network states or nation states. I mean, my theory is basically forkable open source software is powerful because we can build smart contracts that solve the prisoner's dilemma. And because anyone can fork it, it's not like you have Zuckerberg extracting from your community. Your community can bootstrap its own like prisoner's dilemma solving coordination tools. And I guess I want to hear your take on these things.
Totally. So actually, a couple of things. One is, I'll probably have like a longer answer. Vitalik wrote a very thoughtful review and so on. One thing he talks about is how he'd like to see more on exit to community. And actually, I do have a whole section on M&A of network states and how a founder can hang up the cleats and so on and so forth. But another thing is not just exit to community, but exit to world, which is open sourcing the whole thing and having anybody have it, right? So rather than one founder giving it to N people, a community, he gives it to everybody, which is exit to world, right? So that's kind of one part. The other part is you're saying, how can you help existing nations, existing network states? Well, it kind of, not all nation states are in the same, in my view, negative shape. First of all, the term nation state, people use it as a compound noun. But for example, maybe if you've read it, do you know the difference between the nation and the state?
Yeah, so I think that the state is sort of like the bureaucracy that organizes things, but there's different nations within states. So like the Reds and the Blues in the United States, or the Kurds within the Iraqi is the example that you give.
Yeah, exactly. And so the thing is, that's right. So basically, the nation, it comes from like the same kind of root word as natality, like common birth, common descent, common genetics or history or culture or language. Like the Japanese people have descended from, and they speak the same Japanese language and so on. And there's a Japanese state, which is a tiny layer on top of the Japanese people. That's today it's a democracy. In the past, it was like Imperial Japan, and before that, it was something else. And the thing is that France understands this well because it's on its like Fifth Republic or something, and so they just keep changing out this layer. And the French people, you might say they remain the same, but what's interesting is French nationalism itself is something of a social, very much a social construct. Hobsbawm, who I quote in the book, he cites a fact which says, or like he says that only a small percentage of people around the time of the French Revolution spoke what we think of today as French. At the time, they spoke many other kinds of dialects, and then nationalism at that time was a left-wing ideology, which said, let's unify this huge group of people under what's common, which is our language, and the administrative uniformity. Let's overthrow the royals and the monarchs and so on and so forth. Okay, and so the thing is that when you talk about capacity for collective action, it is about tools. Absolutely, it's about tools. That is very important. But it's about beliefs and alignment. It's like you want people to want to do the right thing together. And, having values being explicit. Now, you don't have to enumerate every single thing that people believe, because then you'll get into what Scott Alexander, calls scissor statements, right? Or the famous joke about like Christian denominations. I've
never heard that one. No.
Hold on, let me see if I can go something like this. Once I saw this guy in a bridge about to jump. I said, don't do it. He said, nobody loves me. I said, God loves you. Do you believe in God? He said, yes. I said, are you a Christian or a Jew? He said, Christian. I said, me too. Protestant or Catholic? He said, Protestant. I said, me too. What franchise? He said, Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Baptist or Southern Baptist? He said, Northern Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist or Northern Liberal Baptist? He said, Northern Conservative Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist, Great Lakes region or Northern Conservative Baptist, Eastern region? He said, Northern Conservative Baptist, Great Lakes region? And then he said, Northern Conservative Baptist, Great Lakes region, Council of 1912. I said, die, heretic, and I pushed him over, right? And, that's like a classic, sort of joke about, when people really took the Christian, stuff, seriously, right? And exactly. And the thing is, if you look at crypto tribalism, or you look at Unix, or you look at, there's certain aspects of human nature with the fissioning and factionalization and so on. Like you have something really big, and, communism splits and, so on and so forth, right? And so you get, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to sort of combine it also to crypto and say, like, as long as you're a regen Web3 Ethereum and not a degen Ethereum, then you're fine with me, and I won't.
Exactly. And you know what? The thing about this is, once you start thinking about those scissor statements, and just to clarify, you should Google this. It's like sort by controversial, create short story by Scott Alexander. So scissor statements are a statement that, like, basically one group thinks is true and the other group thinks is false. But they both think it's obviously true or obviously false. I won't even repeat a scissor statement here. Or actually, a good example of one that's less hot today, but that was a big deal like 15 years ago. Did Iraq have WMDs?
Right.
Okay. Like, so that was something which, some group thought was obviously true because, like the UN said this and that, and the other group says obviously false, and, blah, blah, blah. And so that's a great example of something that just gets people bickering because one group thinks it's obviously true, the other group thinks it's obviously false. And so you want to minimize, I mean, there's different ways of dealing with this, right? One is to not allow anybody to say any scissor statements. Okay. That's actually not, whether by convention or so on, people used to have this convention, like don't talk about religion or politics,
Right.
So that was like kind of one thing. Then with social media, everybody could talk about anything, and these seem to be some of the most engaging topics. So they got a lot of engagement because they scissored up the whole country and so on and so forth.
Right.
The second possibility is you select people on scissor statements, and so they, these are like Boolean variables, and let's say each one cuts not exactly 50% of the population, but it cuts into two. So maybe this is a 30-70 split and a 20-80 split, and now you're down to this group of people that agrees with you on all these core premises, and they really agree with you, et cetera. Okay.
Right.
And the third possibility is something like the pseudonymous economy, where you only disclose those aspects that people really need to know. And all the rest is done through cryptography and whatnot. And you bring your minimum necessary self to work, recognizing that, there's something that, you basically just don't want to know. It's you heard the term TMI, too much information?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you literally don't want to know. And it's a different sense of TMI, right? And,
right.
So the point being that scissor statements are something to manage for collective action. It's not just about the tools. That's the software.
Right.
It's about the beliefs in people's heads, the intellectual software, their morals and their beliefs in alignment, what they think of as good and bad.
Yeah. So it seems like in order to, you kind of want to close the scissor. So we can do that with zero knowledge cryptography, bottoms up open source software that creates cooperation across distance. And it seems like to me, the opportunity here is to create bottoms up coordination in the nation, as opposed to just the top down coordination that has come from the state in the past. And so bottoms up public goods that creates cooperation across distance with these like scissored groups, it feels like the opportunity for me with Web3 and with network states. I'd be curious to your reaction to that.
I think that's good. I'm definitely supportive of building organic communities. And the thing is, like, localism is kind of a good concept, except I think you need a digital localism because most people don't know their neighbors anymore, but they know people who are their social network neighbors, right?
So they're neighbors in the network state.
Well, their neighbors in the cloud become their neighbors on the earth.
Right.
So because they group together, they have common values, and they get, some plot of land in Ohio or something like that. You have sub communities, sub networks within the network state. I mean, one way of thinking about it is, I go through a bunch of different authors who have thought about what is a nation, and it's kind of like the tail and the snout and so on of the elephant. They're like, oh, a nation is. Go ahead.
I was just going to explain the analogy that you made there, where you've got 5 blind men and an elephant.
Yes.
And one of them grabs and says he grabs the trunk and says, "This is a tree," and then another grabs the tusk and says, "This is a sphere," and then another one grabs the eyes and says, "This is a squid," or something like that. And they not all of them fail to grasp the entire elephant. So you're saying there are different authors that have grasped different parts of what a nation means, and but yeah, continue after that.
Yeah, and I offer, obviously, maybe I'm just grabbing, the horns or something like that, the tusks. But my definition is kind of interesting, maybe interesting. It's a computational definition that a nation is a densely connected subgraph in the social network or in a social network, right? Why do I say that? Because a complete graph is one where every node is connected to every other node. Okay. But a densely connected subgraph means that if you have 100 nodes, they don't have necessarily all 100 choose two mutual, connections. And that's a symmetric graph. You could have asymmetric graphs and other things. They don't have necessarily all 100 choose two connections, but they have way more internal connections than they do with 100 random people. It's a genuine community. It's a densely interlinked community of people who like each other and work with each other and share the same values and so on and so forth. That starts to define what like a nation is, not the lines on a map. So this is similar to like what's funny about it is it's actually like the liberal or internationalist view of what a nation is. A nation is not necessarily people, related by blood or what have you. It's those people who, in Renan's, words, have done great things together and wish to do more. It's they've signed the social contract to be, that's not Renan's, that's, Rousseau's, right? The Renan-Rousseau model is Renan, they've done great things and want to do great things together. Rousseau, for the state, you sign the social contract to be part of the state. So the nation state is kind of the combination of those two concepts, right? There's a group that has like this common, alignment, and they have, whether it's language or culture or, feeling of collective purpose. And then they have a government, a state that helps coordinate them.
Mm-hmm.
And now, to your point, could you have like these, communities that are doing collective things within a larger state and so on? Sure, you could. And that's good. Okay. And, for many things, it'll be fine to do that. No one's going to care if you are, just cleaning up the neighborhood or something like that, or, building open source stuff. Most of those things will be okay. Except I do think that nowadays, anything that's beautiful in some way, someone is going to attack it for some grounds. Oh, it's exclusive in this way. Oh, it's not patriotic in this way, et cetera, et cetera. So you just can't be like, the naive farmers and not have any form of intellectual self-defense. Okay. It's kind of, you ever play the game Civilization?
I have not.
Okay. So in Civilization, basically it's it's this game where you can start as the Iroquois or the Indians or, the Russians or whatever. You can basically start as different civilizations and you build up, right? And the thing about Civilization is there's a guaranteed way to lose, which is to just put everything into, commerce and technology and not have any defense whatsoever and try to ascend the tech tree. And what happens? The guy next door who sends in like one spearman just takes all your stuff, right? That's what happens when you're at 99%, 100% commerce and technology, 0% defense. Okay. Conversely, if all you do is you crank out soldiers and stuff, well, it's saying, you don't have you may have defense, but you don't have a civilization worth defending. And so you just end up as this sort of primitive barbarian tribe that's attacking and you don't level up. And so the right approach is a V3 that says, okay, I'm going to allocate some to building and some to critiquing the critiquers of builders. That's a digital version of it, right? Because most of society, I think, is invested in critiquing and tearing things down. There's some group that says, ignore all that and just build. And I vibe with the second group a lot, but I also think some of them are naive because they'll build something great. And guess what? The critiquers are like armed robbers, gangs whose only thing is patrolling the internet and finding some way to try to morally bully you into handing it over to them, right? And go ahead.
I was going to say, it reminds me of, if you ever hear Vitalik talk about proof of stake, he talks about in order to design a economic network that is secure, you have to make it 1,000 times cheaper to defend than it is to attack. And what this does over time is, like with proof of stake Ethereum, it hardens it so that basically any attacker is going to have to expend way more resources in order to tear down what you're building. And therefore it deters attackers from doing that. So it creates anti-fragility at the base layer.
That's right. And there's different ways of doing defense. Pseudonymity is a form of defense where so long as you maintain OPSEC, which is hard, okay, but that's kind of a form of sort of passive self-defense, right? It's not the self-defense of a gun. It is actually, in a sense, security through obscurity. People don't have 33 bits on you. You know what 33 bits is? It's Arvind Narayanan's concept of 2 to the 33rd is like 8 billion. And so that's with 7-something billion people in the world, with 33 bits of independent information on somebody, you could de-anonymize them. And so the degree of pseudonymity you have can be thought of as being on a continuum. Like you have 10 bits of anonymity, you're part of a pseudonymity set of 1,000 people. If you have 20 bits, you're part of 1 million people, right? So you put anonymity, pseudonymity on a continuum, and certain actions, like showing a particular cryptic credential, it shows now that you're part of a 1 million person group.
Right.
But it doesn't fully de-anonymize you. And, so that may be a sufficient, that may be an acceptable cost of a decrement in pseudonymity, a reduction in OPSEC to achieve whatever goal you want.
So basically, like, pseudonymity is a way to be defensive and anti-fragile. I guess that, are there other ways that we can create more coordination and be able to build these digital public goods and not do it in a naive way? Like, how do we create more coordination and not have it be the naive variety where we're all just kind of like pie in the sky building these non-defensible systems?
Well, I think that, you should basically, well, first of all, having a moral one commandment is important because that's dual purpose. Yeah, it's dual purpose actually, right? If you really believe that something you're doing is good and you've got hundreds of citations and videos and films and you can show the deficiencies of society at large and so on and so forth, you have an argument for your right to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody who's coming at you and trying to delegitimize you, well, they will have to punch their way through all those citations and counter argue, because everybody in your community is equipped with that initial set of shields of citations that knock them down. And the initial, at least it might be, by the way, it might be the case that even despite that, you've gotten something wrong and your community fizzles out and it doesn't test empirically and so on and so forth. That actually happened in many of the American communes. Their moral innovation didn't work, just like many startup companies don't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the One Commandment gives that self-defense, because now if somebody wants to critique at least, the lazy V1 obvious, kind of attacks, that falls on deaf ears. And frankly, most of the sort of marauding social media people that want to attack don't have any depth to their thinking. For example, there's this guy the other day who was like, oh my God, I can't believe you made all this money and you're unpatriotic and you're now exiting. Oh, you traitor, blah, blah. And it's like, wait a second. This is like, this is the kind of person who wanted H-1Bs to come to the country, to work hard, to do all this stuff, to not choose other countries, but now says they can't leave, but they're slaves, right? And doesn't understand that actually the rest of the world doesn't have shootings and it has reproductive choice and other stuff. Like, this person's like very entitled in a certain way, and that they will, in a different context, talk about how America is a nation of immigrants and how good that is, but then they hate the immigrant. And every immigrant is tautologically an immigrant, right? They emigrated from somewhere. Are we saying that someone who immigrates from India is betraying India, or from Poland, they're betraying Poland? This is the stupidest thing in the world. They're, like, you're supposedly, people don't even think about that part of it, right? Are they saying that their ancestors who got on, the ships to come to, there's a Mayflower, Ellis Island, or got on a plane, that they were betraying their home country? I don't think so. And moreover, it doesn't have to be like, are we saying like, somebody who comes from South America, Latin America, that they have to fix the problems of the political system in their home country before coming here? No, I do not believe that you can put that, onus on every single person. Right. And so folks who haven't thought it through will try these, in my view, kind of stupid arguments. And you can just knock that down with, there's a few citations there. I could really write a whole book on just that, on the right to exit. And in fact, it's actually one of the UN's fundamental rights. Article 13 is, everyone has the right to leave any country, including their own, right? And that doesn't mean the right to enter everywhere, by the way. Just like, you can't imprison somebody in your house, but that doesn't mean that somebody can enter every house. Those are different things.
Yeah.
But it does mean that you can't have like this, sort of prison status. The point is, that's an example of somebody who's just got a lazy attack that, just easily kind of batted away, because they really haven't thought through the morality of it at all, And so thinking through the morality of it is, it's basically like programming the software of people's heads, having a really clear sense of why they're doing what they're doing, and the ability for them to defend that on their own or in groups. And frankly, to interrogate it, because it might be inconsistent. This premise might not add up. And so that ethical thinking is, I think, really underappreciated, because when you have true clarity of purpose and when people really, 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 really believe in what they're doing, that's when you build great things, in my view.
It's just so interesting that, well, first off, with the right to exit, I was talking to someone as I was doing my research for this podcast, and one interesting sort of observation, Balaji, was that network states are going to allow refugees to resettle in new places more easily. So say you're in Syria, you're in the Ukraine, and you have to go west because of some sort of physical war, you're going to be able to resettle in your new place easier, because you're bringing your assets with you, but also your connections from the network state into that nation. So it creates more of a right to exit in the physical world.
Ukraine actually has this pretty interesting thing. They're like digital government. Do you know about this? This thing where it's called DIIA, okay? And it's made it much easier for those refugees to integrate into like the UK and other places. They actually just had that in the end of 2021. And like this site says 13 million out of 44 million inhabitants. And so because of that, they were able to, sometimes they had to flee with just, possessions on their back, but they had their phone. And guess what? They could prove who they were because, most of the time when people are fleeing, they don't have their papers and so on. They're, stateless persons. But this allowed them to sort of integrate into new society, get new identity documents and whatnot, right? So DIA, I think, is pretty important and a piece of the future. And just wanted to flag that, for your
nice.
Your
we'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
So Balaji, thanks for coming on the GreenPilled podcast to talk about the network state. Where can we find you online, and how can we engage with the network state ideas?
Well, go to thenetworkstate.com and go subscribe there. And there will be, I've kind of only written, in my view, half the book. I've got so much supplemental stuff and arguments tied up and images and code and stuff like that. So subscribe there. I'm also on Twitter at BalajiS, and look forward to seeing everybody. And it's all free. And if you want to buy it on Amazon, you'll get the offline Kindle version. Oh, we will do like a hardcover and Audible later in the year. Once I finish the book, then we'll tape it out. So
right. I just think one thing that's cool about what you're doing is that you're writing the book, at least the next version of the book, with the community as you share these ideas, and you're kind of getting the Steelman version back. So you're kind of using the network to write the book.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And the feedback from that is helpful because I think some of the basic concepts are out there, but there's certain things that, I can add facts to and, FAQs and whatnot. So, okay. Well, Amazing. This is great.
Thanks so much for being on the show, Balaji. Really appreciate you and your work. And let us know if Gitcoin or the Ethereum community can do anything for you in the future.
Well,
thanks again.
I'm a huge fan of you guys. Okay. Thanks. All right. Bye.